Are you with me? Understand the questions?
Yes, Miss.
Okay.
So if without the defendant act or omission, I'm sorry, if without the defendant omission to act, the loss, injury, or damages still occur, then there is no causal link between the defendant breach and the injury of the plaintiff.
Good. Yeah, you are correct. Okay. If the answer to the but for questions is yes, and then there is no causal link between the defendant act, okay, or the defendant break duty, and then the answer is the defendant is not negligent. Okay. If the answer to that question is no, and then the answer to the questions whether there any causal links will be yes. And in that situation, the defendant has been negligent. Okay, so we already gone through the test of negligence by answering the 4 questions. Okay, so even though your answer to all of the 4 questions are yes, okay, you still need to consider the 5th questions in order to come to the conclusions on whether the defendant is liable to pay damages and how much the amount of damages that the defendant have to pay. So we look at the 5th question, is there any defense? Okay, and then if the answer to the questions, is there any defense? Yes. And then the answer is the defendant is, if the answer is, the answer to the questions, is there any defense? Is yes. And the defendant is not what? Liable. Okay, because there is the defense for him. Okay, or defendant liability will be reduced. Okay, if the answer is no, and then the conclusion is the defendant is liable. Okay, understand? Everyone, any questions? I hope not. So we then look at the defense. So here is the slide talking about injury, damage, or loss to the plaintiffs. This is about the question number 3 that we already discussed. I just want to repeat, the injuries could be personal injury, it could be a damage to properties, or economic loss. What economic loss mean? Anyone have an idea of economic loss? Right. It could be the profit that you can earn or the income that you can earn. Yep, good. All right. Okay. And if the defendant act negligently, but the plaintiff luckily suffer no injury, there should be no recovery negligence, which means that you can't, okay, recover the damage. You can't recover something, okay? You can't claim for damages if you suffer no injuries, no damage, no economic loss. Okay, so you could remember here is about the damages which could be recoverable under the tort of negligence, not only the personal injury, but also damage to properties or economic loss. You need to bear this in mind, because in the chapter 4, we will look at strict liabilities, and we will know that the amounts of damages that the plaintiffs can recover is not as much as what he or she can claim under negligence. Okay, remember this in order to compare when we study about strict liability. So about causations, we already discussed about the but-for test. Okay, this could be causation in facts, that is actual cause, and proximate cause, which means legal cause. The difference is that causation in facts mean actual cause, so we use but-for test, but proximate cause mean a legal cause that refer to the situation you can be exempted from liabilities if you can prove that the damage is actually too remote to be recovered, or it's too far away, it's not foreseeable. Okay, it's not foreseeable, even though there is a cultural link. But if it is not foreseeable, and then there is no proximate cause or legal cause, and you could not be liable for that as well. I just want to give you an example in order for you to understand the proximate cause. Assuming that a farmer who do some farming, and in doing so, he burned his farm. And when he burned his farm, the fire rid out of his farm, and actually a fire forest next to his farm. And inside of the forest, there is a factory, a chemical factories, and the fire rid to the chemical factory, and the factory exploded. Inside of the factories, there are chemical pour out next to the factories. There are river, and the chemical pour out into the river, and people who live at the end of the river use the water in the river and suffer some disease. And my question is whether a person who live at the end of the river, who suffer some kind of disease because they use the water, and the water contain the chemical, can they take legal actions against the farmer under the tort of negligence? Are you with me? You follow the case? Okay, so what could be your answer? Anyone have an idea to answer the questions? Anyone? What do you think? Whether the farmer could be liable for person who live at the end of the river with maybe 100 kilometers away from the farm because they suffer some disease due to the use of the water, which had been polluted by the chemical from the explosion of the chemical factories. Anyone?
Miss, can I answer this question?
Sure, please.
So, in my opinion, that situation will lack proximate causation because the harm happened in this case were not foreseeable because when the farmer he set fire to the farm, he didn't know that it will lead to the pollution in the river, which is more than 100 kilometers away.
Yeah, actually, yes, your answer is a reasonable link, right?
Yes.
Because it could not be foreseeable for the farmer when he burned his farm 1 kilometer away. It is not about the 100 kilometers away, but it is actually about whether he can't foresee that the fire what can be foreseeable is that if he did not take a reasonable care, the fire can break out in order to burn the forest next to the farm. But he couldn't imagine or foresee that the fire will reach into he may not know that there is a chemical factories inside of the river, inside of the forest, and then the fire can reach into the chemical factories, make it exploded, and the chemical could pour out into the river next to the factories, and then cause injuries, cause disease to someone else who live at the end of the river, which is 100 kilometers away from his farm. Okay, yep, good. Yeah, so that is about proximate cause or legal cause. Very, very good, Ling. Okay. So yeah, here is the clear explanations. Okay, the clear explanations. Actual cost. Okay, we apply but for tax, you can see here, if the plaintiffs in a poor health and likely could have had the heart attacks, whether or not he had taken the defendant drug products, the drugs is not the actual cause, and therefore defendants shall not be liable. Okay, proximate cause, this is about foreseeable consequences, and here is a very famous example, the case with a called photograph. That was the case. I will explain to you about the case. That is the situations when a guy who tried to get into a train when the train is about to leave, and actually when he tried to get into the train, the train is going to leave already, and then for the security guys at the train station, they break their duty of care because they did not prevent that passengers to jump into the train when the train is about to leave. And that passengers try to jump into the train when the train is about to leave, and he dropped his bag into the platform, and inside of his bag there is explosion chemical, and when he left his bag into the platform, the chemicals inside of his bag exploded, cause injury to someone who live at the platform, who stay at the platform. And the question is whether the security guy who actually take care of the passengers in the train station or the train station operators itself could be liable for the damage, the loss occurred to other passengers who stand on the platform. And then the conclusions of that case is that no, because that risk is not foreseeable. Okay? Understand? Anyone have questions? Yep, good. Anyone have questions on the case that I have just give at another example of a foreseeable consequences? Okay. If you have no questions for this one, I will move on to look at the defense. I hope it could be, yeah. Here are the several defenses available to negligence case, okay? And they are superseding or intervening event, assumption of risk defense, contributory negligence, and comparative negligence. In fact, contributory negligence and comparative negligence have some similarities, and remember that for, but it have some differences which tend to be make them become opposite. Totally opposite. So we have contributory negligence and comparative negligence, but remember that in the United States, each of the states apply different rules. Some states apply contributory negligence at a defense, some other states apply comparative negligence at a defense to negligence case. And with respect to comparative negligence, there are two types of comparative negligence as well. And the state that apply one type of comparative negligence will not apply the other types. Okay, so I will explain this to you clearer in the next section. Okay, all right. Can you wait me for a second? I will be back in a minute. Okay, sorry for a second. Okay, so we look at different types of defense. First of all, we look at superseding or intervening event. Actually, this is a situation where there is an event for which the defendant is not responsible, cutting off the causal link. Okay, so you remember that for the fourth element that you need to prove in the tort of negligence, that is the causal link between the defendant acts or omission to act, which means the defendant break of duty and the loss of damage or injuries that the plaintiff have to suffer, right? But if there is something that cut off the causal links, and then the defendant could not be liable for something, for the consequences, okay, with caused by other events, not immediately by his action or omission to act. For example, the victim of the car accident, when waiting for the ambulance to come, were killed by a bone of lining. You know a bone of lining? So when the victims who was injured by the accident lie on the road waiting for the ambulance to come, and he was killed by the bone of lining. So the bone of lining is actually an event with cut off the causal link between the accident and the death of that guy. So the person who caused the accident could not be liable for the victim death. Okay, understand this defense?
Yes, understand.
Good. The questions? Anyone have questions?
Can you give us one more example for that defense?
Yeah, the other example is that a guy who was poisoned by another person, right? He went to the the guy, no, not that is intentional tort already. I talk about the other situation. Okay, for example, a doctor who actually inject 19 COVID vaccine to someone, but he didn't check carefully a situation of that guy. Okay, he inject the COVID-19 vaccine to that guy, but then the next day that guy was suffer a heart attack, and that guy died. Okay, so there is no evidence showing that he died because of the injections of the COVID-19 vaccine, even though the doctor did not check his situation carefully. But there is no link between the vaccine and the death of that guy. He would die because of the heart attacks, and he was the one who had the heart attacks previously. Not he had the heart attacks certainly, okay, and there is no scientific evidence, scientific research showing that COVID-19 vaccine could cause heart attacks, for example. And even so, the doctor could not be liable because that is not his fault. Okay, he was died by the heart attacks, even though before that the doctor did not check his situation carefully, but he never had the heart attacks before. Okay, that is another example. No direct cause. Okay. Clear? Anyone else have different idea or other questions?
Miss, I have questions about the poison case you have just mentioned. What if a guy he is poisoned by another person, but the waiter did not know about that, so he served the guy with the poisonous drink, and so the waiter do have to so do the waiter have to be liable for his for the guy's death?
No, I already canceled the example about the poison.
Yeah.
That's not relevant. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because the poison is actually an intentional tort already.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
We talk about negligence. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the next types of defense available under the tort of negligence is assumption of risks. So there are two elements that you need to prove if you want to take a legal actions. If you want to use the assumption of risks as a defense. So the plaintiffs, the defendant have to prove two following elements. The first one is that the plaintiffs is aware of and assume the normal risks of the activities, and the plaintiff voluntarily participate in such risk activities. Okay, and if the defendant is able to prove so, and then the defendant can come to the conclusions that he had a defense, or in other words, a defense is available to him. Okay, so there are two elements that the defendant need to prove in order to come to the conclusions that the defense is available to him, which is the plaintiff is aware of and assume the normal risks of the activities and voluntarily participates in such activities. So the example on the board is that the race car drivers may assume the risk of being killed in car crash, because you know that car racing could be very dangerous. And the one who participates, usually those who participate in the sporting case, could assume the risks that may happen out of that sport. He could be aware of the risks of car crash and may assume that he may die in the car crash by accident, but he does not assume the risk of faultily designed race course. Why? Why the law doesn't assume that he assumed the risk of faultily designed race course? Why? Anyone have an idea? Anyone? What is the main reason? Sorry, I didn't get the point. The first sentence that you said. Okay, right. Anyone else have different idea? Anyone? Hmm. Anyone else have different idea? Anyone have any idea, different ideas?
I think that there are a lot of elements that contribute to conclusion whether the driver can assume the risk of the faultily designed race course or not. The first of all is that, in my opinion, that design race course shall have a minor difference from other design race courses, which cannot be recognized by bare eyes, and only driver or experienced driver who drive on that course can recognize the difference. And number two is that to design a race course that is that has a fault is a process, and they will need a lot of designers and or engineers and technical evaluation to make that race course. So it really difficult to say that whether that race course is faultfully is faultily designed or not.
Mm. Right. So it seems that all of the questions okay, for the test of negligence already been fulfilled, okay, for the designer of the race course. If the damage or the risk happen, or the death of the race car driver come from the designs, the faulty in the designs of the race course. Yes, all of the tests for negligence had been fulfilled. All right. So in that case, assumption of risk cannot be used, because a person who enter into the race course will not repay for the risk happened to him because of the defect in the design of the golf course. Okay, understand? Okay, so we move on. If you have no more questions, we then move on to look at contributory negligence. So what contributory negligence mean? Contributory negligence means the negligence, the plaintiffs also contribute to the negligence that cause injuries, loss, or damage to him. Okay, and contributory negligence defense are used in some states only, not every states, just only in some states. Okay, and that is a situation when the plaintiffs also contribute to the risk, contribute to the loss that he have to suffer. Okay, right, and he was at fault as well, not only the defendant, but the plaintiffs were also at fault. For example, if you pass the red light in the traffic, okay, right, and someone in hit green light hit you and cause injury to you, okay, and in that situation, the one who passed the red light in the traffic could not be able to claim damages under the tort of negligence, because if that states apply the contributory negligence defense. Okay. Anyone have questions or idea? Okay, so this seem to be very strict, very harsh for the plaintiffs in the states that applied contributory negligence. Okay, however, there is an exception that you should pay attention to, that is class clear change doctrine. Okay, so what is class clear change doctrines about? The class clear change doctrines apply to the situation when there is a change, there are opportunities for the defendant to avoid the loss, injuries, or damage occur, but he did not take that opportunities. For example, if you actually enter into, if you ride a car, okay, or you ride motorbike in the traffic, and usually when you pass the red light in the traffic, when you pass the traffic light, even it green or red, okay, when you see the traffic light, usually you slow down, okay, you slow down a bit. If it is green from far away and you can easily get through the green light with normal speed or even a little bit higher speed, it's okay. But when you stop in the red light, okay, and the light turn green, okay, and at the time the light turn green, usually when you start moving, you will start at a slow speed. So assuming that someone, their light is green and it is about to red, and immediately when it turned red, and a person who are moving and try to pass the red light, when it is just about turn red, okay, he is about to pass that red light when it is just about to turn red. And in that situation, you are on the green light and you have the right to move when the light turn green. But usually when it starts to turn green, you will not speeding at that moment. And you also, as a prudent person and as an ordinary person acting reasonably, you will carefully look at the other side to see whether there is anyone who's continue to pass the cross intersection, okay, the intersection. But if you were speeding at that moment very fast, when the red light turn, the red light turn on, okay, on your side, and you hit someone who tried to pass the red light, in that case, the court usually consider that is the class clear chain doctrine, which means that you have an opportunity to avoid accident, but you did not take that opportunity. You did not careful enough in order to avoid, or you are deemed to be possible to avoid that accident, but you did not. So that is the class clear chance. And this is an exception if the plaintiff can prove that there is a class clear chain for you to avoid accident, but you did not take that change. You do not take that opportunities. You still hit someone and cause injury to them, even though they contribute to the negligence. But in that case, you can't rely on the contributory negligence defense in order to be released absolutely from liabilities. Okay, you understand about the contributory negligence and clear chance doctrine? Okay. Okay, everyone. Okay, so I think that we have a break, okay? And after the break, we will return to look at the last, not the last,